Hello everyone. In this video we're going to pick up where we left off in the last video, and you'll see on my screen I have the website, the example that we opened in at the conclusion of the previous lesson. So what we need to do here is make an adjustment to the code because there's an error in it from the last video, and I will just switch over to the code here so that you can see where this is at. If you scroll down to the bottom of the HTML code at the bottom of the document, you'll see that I left an extra dot in here when I changed the one for the style sheet. So this script tag should have the source that points to the JS folder and the bootstrap.bundle.min.js file inside that folder. I'm also going to make one other adjustment. I'm going to cut that script tag out of the bottom there, and I'm just going to move it up to the top of the document. Now, you may have read or heard, or you will at some point, that if you're including a JavaScript file that interacts with the document object model, that you should put it right before the closing body tag. Yet, that's not the only way to include JavaScript files. It's okay to put those files in the head element of your document as long as you include, if they need to be loaded after the HTML. Well, let me rephrase that. If they need to be run, if the script needs to run after the HTML is completely loaded, you just need to put a defer attribute on the script tag if you put it in the head element of your document. So that's the method I'm going to use here. They do the same thing. The idea is if the page hasn't loaded already and you try to interact with it, you may get errors and some of the functionality might not work right. So you just want the HTML to be completely loaded before you start running JavaScript, and that's what this does by putting the defer attribute on the script tag. The other way of doing it is like it was before, by putting the script tag at the bottom of the page. If it never gets loaded until the bottom of the HTML, since the browser loads it in order, then your HTML will be completely loaded or mostly loaded before the JavaScript runs. Anyway, so now we're going to move on to what I wanted to accomplish in this video, and that is simply getting some of these main images in place. We're going to basically include 4 images in this video. The first one is going to be the logo that goes in this header bar. And then the other 3 are going to be the slides for the slideshow, and that should fill out the amount of time that I've allotted for this video, and then we'll work on some other things in subsequent videos. So let's get into that. What I want to do is I want to open up the images that we're going to use, and actually I've already created the images. Let me just show you here in the project. I have all the images here. So I have a brakes image, I have a diagnostics image, and I have an oil changes image. As you'll notice in the example that we're working from, that is here, you'll see that the images that are in the slideshow, they have kind of a tint overlay on them. Other than that, they're just regular photos. Now, the images that I am going to use, I got from a free stock photo website, and I'll have the link to those images in the description of this video. But after you get those images, or when you get the ones that you want to use, they may be too bright to get this contrast between the text that's over the top of these images and the images themselves. So what I needed to do in my case was add this tint so that there would be this contrast between the text and the images in the background. And so I'm going to show you with one image how I did that, and then you can do yours the same way if you choose to. Before I do that though, I'm just going to quickly show you how I did the logo. The logo I created using Inkscape, and I have a video of how I did that on this channel in a separate video. But once you have the logo created, whatever size your logo is, you just want to make sure that you resize it so that it will work for our design. And really that's all I did with this one. I'm just going to size it, scale it down to 100 pixels high and 213 pixels wide. So that's basically what I did here, and then I just exported it to the project folder in the image directory inside of the project. So that's what I did for the logo. And then for these images, I researched what size of image would be the best for the design. And what I found was that a 1920 by 620 aspect ratio is perfect for the design so that it follows the model that we're working from. So in GIMP you can do that by, on your crop tool, just setting a fixed aspect ratio by typing in the width and then a colon and then the height. And then once you get that in there, if you would like to lock that aspect ratio, you can just click the box that says fixed. And then when you crop this, it will crop at that aspect ratio no matter what. So that's what I did. I basically did that with this image. However, the image was smaller than 1920 before I ever cropped it. So what I had to do then was scale this image up. And I could do that. I could go from a smaller size up to a larger size because of the resolution. This is a high-res image. It's 300 dpi. So when I scaled it up, it didn't really lose any quality, and I'll show you what I mean. I'll just change this to 1920, and you'll see that it's automatically proportioned correctly. So when I hit scale, it enlarges it, but the quality is still there. After I did that, I simply just added a layer over the top, a transparent layer over the top of that image, and then I took my paint bucket tool with black as my fill color. I took my paint bucket tool and I just dumped black inside of that transparent layer. And that covers up the whole image. However, if I just reduce the opacity down to about 80 is what I found works pretty good. I could just reduce the opacity and then again export the image as a JPEG and then use it in the project. So that's how I did the 3 images that we're going to use for the slideshow. So I'm going to close this down now and just show you how we get this in here. We're going to edit the code to get those in place. So I'm going to come over here to the code editor. I'm using an IDE for mine. And looking at the code, I notice there's some extraneous code in here that we don't really need. And I'll show you what that is. If you look at the design, you'll see this little theme switcher down here. Well, we're not really going to use that in our design, so we just need to get rid of that code, and that code is what you see at the top of this document. It's basically this first SVG element and then the div element that immediately follows it. So we're just going to remove all that code because we don't really need it for what we're doing here. So I remove that, and then what we want to do is put our 4 images in place. So you'll see here that we're inside of the carousel item. There's 3 carousel items inside of a carousel inner div, and then all of those are inside of another div that has an ID of my carousel. So what we want to do is basically change the image that's inside of each of these carousel items. And because they're all placeholder code, we can just select one of them, and then in my IDE I have the ability to use multiple cursors. And to do that, I just highlight what I want to find and then hold down Control and hit the D key twice to get all 3 of them. And then I can just remove that line of code and replace it with an image tag. And that image tag is what we're going to use to point to the images folder. Now each image is different, so I'm going to hit escape a couple of times to go back to one cursor. And then I'm going to start by adding in the oil changes image here, and I'll just put in oil changes as the alt attribute. And then the second one, I think I'm going to use the diagnostics image for the second one, and I will use that alt attribute. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Diagnostics. And then the third one we'll use, it'll be brakes. So I'll just type brakes, select that image, and then put the alt attribute on it for brakes. And that should allow our slideshow to work. So before we look at the results, I want to come up here and put our logo in place. Now the logo is going to go right here in place of this word carousel on what is line 16 of my code. So I'm going to come over here and just remove this carousel text, and then I'm going to drop down to a new line, and I'm going to insert an image here. And this image is basically going to again point to the images folder, img slash, and I want to put logo web ready is what I called it when I exported it. And I want to put that one in there, and I'm just going to put the name of the business here for the alt attribute. And then we'll click save, and then I'm going to switch over to the browser and then refresh the page, and you'll see we have a slideshow. We have our logo in place, and the slideshow should be wired up and working. Let's just give it a couple of seconds here. Yeah, okay, so it switched. So our slideshow is working, and it's looking pretty nice. There's one other thing that I want to change regarding the slideshow, though. Actually, a couple of things, because we've got a little bit more time in the video. The first thing is I want to line all this text up into the center. Now we're not going to align it vertically just yet, but we will make sure that they're all right here in the middle. And then I also want to remove these indicators, and I want to remove these buttons, because we're going to make this carousel crossfade instead of slide the way it is right now. And if it's just a slideshow that's running with a crossfade instead of a slider like this, it's going to look a little different, and we're not going to need to be able to interact with it. So if you go back over to the code, you could leave it like it is right now, but if you want to follow along with how I'm doing it, this is what I'll be doing. I'm just going to remove this section of the carousel indicators, because we're not going to use those. And you'll see that they're targeting the My Carousel ID. So if you leave yours like this, it should work just fine. But here in a minute we're going to change this ID. So if you leave yours like it is, you'll need to change this ID, or you won't have to, but it might be wise for you to, and I'll explain that here in a minute. But if you change this ID, you're going to have to change this data BS target attribute right here, and you're going to have to change it down here with your previous and next buttons because it's right here as well. But because I'm removing them, I'm not going to worry about changing those. I'm just going to take those out. Then I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to remove these two buttons. And what you're going to see is the slider is going to work the same as it does right now. Let me just real quick change this ID to slider, and I'll save it, and then we'll come over here and just refresh the page real quick, and I'll show you. We have no buttons, we have no indicators, so we can't really make it do anything. But if we just wait here, it will fade. Well, actually it's going to slide because we still need to change the mode that it's running in. But we're going to change this so that it slides, or not slides, but crossfades. So go back to your code, and then if you come up here to this slider, I believe it's the slider itself. If you just add carousel dash fade on the slider div tag and then save it, it should change. The other thing that we want to do is we want to remove on the first slide this carousel caption. We want to remove the text start class, and then on the third slide we want to remove the text end class from that one. The default is to be in the center, and so if we remove these classes, it should move that caption to the middle of the slide. So let's go over to the browser and hit refresh, and you'll see that our text is in the middle, and hopefully this thing's going to fade from one to the other if we just give it a minute. Yeah, there. So you'll see we now have a crossfade slideshow instead of a sliding slideshow. And there's various classes that you can use to change the way it works, but this is a good start. We're on our way. We got our 3 slides in there. We've got our logo here, and we could wire up these buttons, and we will later on, but for now that's basically what I wanted to accomplish in this video. There is one other thing that I wanted to share with you, and I mentioned it a minute ago and said I would explain it, and then I did not. So I'm going to go back to the code and just explain to you why I said it might be good for you to change your carousel ID from my carousel to something else. And the reason for that is because when we begin editing this design later on, when we start matching it up with this, we're going to be using more carousels. So here's one here, and then the next section has another one, and then there's even a 4th one on the page down here. So you don't have to change the ID for your carousel right now, the slideshow, but when we start adding multiple carousels to the same page, the IDs need to be unique. So it's good to just change this one right now, because when we add the other ones, they're going to have unique IDs. Otherwise, none of them will work, and it'll be an extra step in troubleshooting if your carousels aren't working because you have duplicated an ID name. And that's what would happen if you left this at my carousel and you did the same thing for all the other ones. The JavaScript wouldn't know how to differentiate one from the other, and they wouldn't work right. So it's a good idea just to change this ID to something that's descriptive for the particular carousel that you're using, and so I just used slideshow. So that is going to bring us to a good stopping point. As always, thank you for watching this video. I hope it helps, and I look forward to you seeing the follow-up videos.